The fall from grace. The crystalline spires of Luminara glowed with their characteristic blue-white light, but to Princess Astra, they had never seemed colder. She stood before the High Council, her translucent skin reflecting the harsh illumination from above, as 12 pairs of eyes regarded her with manufactured disdain. The council chamber, usually a place of wisdom and justice, had become her execution ground. The evidence is irrefutable. First Speaker Zenith declared, his faceted features showing no emotion. You have conspired with the Void Runners to steal the heart of Luminara. Your own genetic signature was found on the temporal lock. The sentence is exile. Astra's inner light flickered with distress. I've been framed. The heart's disappearance coincides with Administrator Vex's suspicious activities in the lower archives. If you'd just investigate. Silence. Zenith's voice reverberated through the chamber. Your desperate accusations only further prove your guilt. The sentence will be carried out immediately. As the guards approached with nullifier cuffs, Astra caught a glimpse of Administrator Vex in the shadows, his crystalline features arranged in a subtle smirk. She had been right about his involvement, but it was too late now. The cuffs snapped around her wrists, immediately dampening her natural ability to absorb and redirect light energy, the birthright of all Luminarians. They marched her through the twisting corridors of the Celestial Palace, past servants and courtiers who averted their eyes. These same people had bowed to her just days ago. Now they treated her like a shadow, a darkness in their perfect, luminous world. The exile ship waited in the launching bay, a small vessel barely larger than an escape pod. It was designed for one purpose: to remove unwanted elements from Luminarian society. As they secured her inside, Astra caught her reflection in the polished surface of the control panel. Her once brilliant form had already begun to dim, the natural light within her fading without her ability to replenish it. Your trajectory has been set for the outer rim, the technician announced, not meeting her eyes. May the First Light have mercy on your soul. The launch was immediate and violent. Astra's ship shot away from Luminara like a stellar ember, breaking through the crystalline sphere that enclosed their artificial atmosphere. As the ship accelerated to skip speed, Astra caught a final glimpse of her homeworld, a perfect sphere of light hanging in the void, beautiful and cruel. Hours passed in the cramped vessel. The autopilot was locked, the communications system disabled. All she could do was watch the stars streak by and try to understand how everything had gone so wrong. She had noticed discrepancies in the energy readings from the heart of Luminara, their civilization's power source, and had begun a quiet investigation. Somehow, Vex had discovered her suspicions and turned them against her. Warning lights suddenly flashed across the console. The ship shuddered violently, throwing her against the restraints. Something had gone wrong with the skip drive. The vessel dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a sickening lurch, tumbling through normal space. Through the view screen, Astra saw an unfamiliar solar system. A yellow star burned at its center, with several planets orbiting at various distances. Her ship's failing systems were caught in the gravity well of a blue-green world, pulling her inexorably toward its surface. The vessel's heat shields activated automatically as it hit the atmosphere, but they weren't designed for this kind of entry. The cabin temperature rose rapidly as warnings blared. Astra closed her eyes, preparing for the end, when a strange thing happened. Her nullifier cuffs, overtaxed by the heat, short-circuited and fell away. With her natural abilities restored, Astra instinctively began absorbing the excess energy from the superheated air around her ship. It was too much, more raw power than she had ever channeled before, but it was the only thing keeping the ship from disintegrating completely. The ground rushed up to meet her. Through gaps in a thick cloud layer, she caught glimpses of mountains covered in white. The ship's emergency systems fired retro-thrusters too late to prevent impact, but enough to turn a fatal crash into merely a devastating one. When Astra regained consciousness, she was lying in cold powder that her ship's computer identified as snow. The vessel was a wreck, split open like a crystal goblet dropped on stone. The atmosphere was breathable but thin, and the temperature was far below anything she had experienced on Luminara. She pulled herself from the wreckage, her body aching but intact. The energy she had absorbed during re-entry swirled inside her, foreign and wild, making her inner light pulse with unknown colors. She needed shelter, needed time to process this strange power before it overwhelmed her. The wind howled across the mountainside, driving ice crystals against her sensitive skin. In the distance, she heard a sound, something alive in this frozen wasteland. But whether it meant help or danger, she couldn't tell. All she knew was that she was alone on an unknown world, branded a traitor, with nowhere to go and no one to trust. As darkness fell and the temperature dropped further, Astra realized that exile might have been the intended punishment, but death in these mountains would be the actual sentence, unless she could find help soon. She began walking, following a valley between towering peaks, hoping to find some sign of civilization before her strength gave out. A friend in the cold. Scout's ears perked up long before Sarah heard anything over the howling wind. The German shepherd's behavior shifted instantly from routine search pattern to alert interest, his tail straight and nose working the air currents. After 5 years as a search and rescue team in the Rocky Mountains, Sarah knew to trust her partner's instincts. "What is it, boy?" she asked, adjusting her headlamp in the pre-dawn darkness. The storm that had blown through yesterday had dropped 2 feet of fresh snow, and they'd been called out to search for possible stranded travelers along the Old Forest Service Road. Scout barked once and pulled against his harness, heading off their planned route toward a steeper section of the mountain. Sarah keyed her radio. "Base, this is Miller. Scout's got something. We're heading northeast from waypoint 7. Over." "Copy that, Miller. Be careful up there. Satellite shows another system moving in. Over." Sarah followed Scout's lead, her snowshoes crunching through the fresh powder. The sky was beginning to lighten, revealing heavy clouds promising more snow. Whatever Scout had sensed, they needed to find it fast. The dog stopped suddenly, hackles rising. A faint glow emanated from behind a ridge of snow-covered rocks, pulsing with colors Sarah had never seen before. Scout whined, torn between his training to approach and some instinctive caution. "Easy, boy," Sarah whispered, unclipping his lead. If there was danger, she wanted him free to move. She drew her emergency flare gun, the closest thing to a weapon she carried, and approached slowly. What she found made her question her sanity. A figure lay half buried in the snow, but it wasn't human. The being appeared feminine, with humanoid features, but her skin was translucent like crystal, glowing from within with swirling patterns of light. She was dressed in what looked like liquid metal that had hardened into cloth, now torn and tarnished. Scout's training overcame his hesitation. He approached the unconscious figure, sniffing carefully before looking back at Sarah with his person in distress signal. Whatever this being was, Scout had decided she needed help. Sarah's mind raced. Her job was search and rescue, but this went way beyond her training. The proper procedure would be to call it in, let the authorities handle it. But something about the alien woman's face, twisted in pain even in unconsciousness, struck a chord. She looked young, lost and afraid, feelings Sarah remembered all too well from her own past. "Base, this is Miller." She keyed her radio again. No signs of stranded travelers. Scout picked up a deer trail. "Going to complete our sweep and head back. Over." "Copy that, Miller. Stay safe out there." Sarah knelt beside the alien woman, pulling off her outer jacket. The being's skin was cold to the touch but not frozen. Whatever she was, her biology worked differently than a human's. Scout pressed against the alien's other side, offering his warmth. "Hey," Sarah called softly, wrapping her jacket around the crystalline shoulders. "Can you hear me?" The alien's eyes fluttered open, revealing irises that swirled like galaxies. She tried to speak, but the words were unlike anything Sarah had heard before, musical and complex. The alien's glow flickered weakly, and she slumped forward. Okay, save your strength. Sarah said, catching her. "I'm going to help you, but you have to trust me. Can you stand?" The alien nodded weakly, seeming to understand, if not the words, then at least the intent. Sarah helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight. Scout circled them anxiously, his training and protective instincts fully engaged. "My cabin's about 2 miles from here," Sarah explained, knowing her words probably meant nothing to the alien. "We need to move fast before this storm hits." "Scout, lead us home." The German shepherd barked once and started breaking trail through the snow. The alien stumbled with each step, but her determination was clear in the way she gritted her teeth, which, Sarah noticed, appeared to be made of some kind of polished crystal. As they walked, Sarah caught glimpses of what looked like a crash site further up the mountain. Twisted metal and crystal fragments scattered across the snow. She'd have to come back later to check it out. But right now, getting this mysterious visitor to safety was the priority. The alien suddenly stiffened, her glow pulsing brightly. She pointed at the sky with a trembling hand. Sarah looked up to see what appeared to be a shooting star, but its movement was too controlled, too purposeful. "Friends of yours?" Sarah asked. The alien's response was to shrink against her, terror clear in her otherworldly eyes. "Right. Not friends then." Scout growled softly, picking up on the alien's fear. Sarah quickened their pace as much as the alien's condition would allow. Whatever was going on, whatever had brought this being to Earth, Sarah had made her choice the moment Scout had signaled someone in need. The storm caught them halfway to the cabin, thick snowflakes reducing visibility to mere feet. Scout stayed close, his black and tan fur collecting snow as he guided them through the whiteout. The alien's glow provided some illumination, but it was weakening with each step. Finally, the dark shape of Sarah's cabin emerged from the swirling white. It wasn't much, a former Forest Service outpost she'd renovated after leaving her old life behind. But right now it represented safety. Scout bounded ahead to the covered porch while Sarah helped the alien up the steps. Inside, Sarah quickly started a fire in the wood stove while Scout shook off the snow and pressed against the alien, who had collapsed onto the worn couch. As warmth filled the small space, the alien's glow steadied slightly, and she looked at Sarah with eyes that held equal parts gratitude and fear. "You're safe here," Sarah said firmly, adding another log to the fire. "Whatever you're running from, whatever brought you here, that can wait. Right now, you need to rest and recover." The alien seemed to understand the sentiment, if not the words. She reached out slowly and placed a crystalline hand on Scout's head, her touch gentle and wondering. The dog's tail wagged as he submitted to the attention, any initial wariness forgotten. Sarah watched them, her mind still struggling to process the reality of the situation. She had an alien refugee in her cabin, possible hostile pursuers in orbit, and a snowstorm isolating them from the outside world. But looking at Scout's complete acceptance of their unusual guest, she knew she'd made the right choice. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Hidden sanctuary. 3 days had passed since Sarah had brought the alien woman to her cabin. The storm had intensified into a full blizzard, isolating them completely, which, given the circumstances, was probably for the best. During that time, their unusual guest had grown stronger, her internal light becoming steadier and brighter. Communication had been their first challenge. The alien, who had managed to convey that her name was Astra, initially tried to speak in her crystalline language, but the sounds were impossible for human vocal cords to replicate. Instead, she proved to be a quick study of English, absorbing words and concepts with remarkable speed. Sarah sat at her small kitchen table, watching as Astra held her hands over a bowl of water, causing it to glow with the same inner light that pulsed beneath her translucent skin. Scout lay at her feet, having appointed himself Astra's personal guardian. "Your world," Astra said carefully, her accent making the words sound musical. "It holds so much raw energy. The light, the heat, the electrical storms. It's overwhelming compared to Luminara, your homeworld." Sarah asked, sliding a mug of hot chocolate across the table. She discovered that while Astra didn't need to eat in the same way humans did, she could absorb energy from hot beverages. Yes, Astra's glow dimmed slightly. A crystal sphere in space, perfectly engineered over millennia. We Luminarians sustain ourselves by absorbing and redirecting light energy. But our sun is dying, growing colder each cycle. She wrapped her hands around the mug, her fingers creating prismatic patterns in the rising steam. That's what makes me so dangerous to them. Sarah leaned forward. Over the past days, Astra had shared pieces of her story, her exile, the conspiracy, the crash. But there was clearly more she hadn't revealed. What do you mean? When I crashed, Astra explained, the energy I absorbed during re-entry. It was different, raw, chaotic, more powerful than anything on Luminara. I can feel it changing me, teaching me new ways to manipulate energy. She gestured at the bowl of water, which now swirled with rainbow colors. This would be impossible on my world. Scout's ears suddenly perked up, and he raised his head with a low growl. Moments later, Sarah heard it too, a deep thrumming that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Astra went completely still, her glow diminishing to barely a flicker. "They're scanning," she whispered. "The exile ship had a tracker. I'd hoped the crash destroyed it." Sarah moved to the window, peering through a gap in the shutters. The blizzard still raged, but somewhere above the storm clouds, she knew ships were searching. How long before they find us? The storm interferes with their sensors, and Earth's magnetic field is stronger than they're used to. But they're persistent. They'll find me eventually. Astra's voice carried a weight of resignation. "I should leave. I'm putting you both in danger." Scout whined and pressed closer to Astra's legs. Sarah turned from the window, her expression determined. "You're not going anywhere. Not in this storm, and not alone." "You don't understand," Astra protested. "The Luminarian Guard, they're not like me. They see other species as primitive, dangerous. If they find me here, they'll consider this cabin a threat to be eliminated." Sarah crossed her arms. "I understand perfectly. You're someone in trouble who needs help. That's what Scout and I do. We help people, even if those people happen to be crystalline aliens from another world." The thrumming grew louder, then faded as whatever craft was scanning moved away. Astra's glow brightened slightly, but her expression remained troubled. "Why? Why risk yourself for someone you don't even know?" Sarah sat back down, considering her words carefully. 8 years ago, I was in a dark place. I'd lost my family, my direction, everything that mattered. I was ready to give up. She reached down to scratch Scout's ears. Then this guy found me. Not literally, he was just a puppy then. But training him, learning to help others through search and rescue, it gave me purpose again. Astra watched them with her galaxy swirl eyes. "A second chance," she said softly. "Exactly. Sometimes people just need someone to believe in them when no one else will." Sarah smiled. Or in this case, someone, and their very good dog. The moment was interrupted by Sarah's emergency radio crackling to life. "All units be advised. Multiple reports of unusual atmospheric phenomena in the high country. Military has declared a no-fly zone. Civilians are advised to shelter in place until further notice." "It's starting," Astra said grimly. "They're widening their search pattern. Soon they'll send ground teams." She stood, pacing the small cabin. "I need to understand what happened during the crash. The energy I absorbed. If I could control it properly, maybe I could defend myself. Defend us." Sarah watched as Astra's agitation caused her glow to pulse erratically, casting dancing shadows around the cabin. An idea began to form. "The crash site. Your ship's computer might have recorded data about the re-entry. If we could reach it." "Too dangerous." Astra cut her off. "The storm, the patrols, is exactly why they won't expect anyone to try." Sarah finished. "Scout and I know these mountains better than anyone. We can get there. Scout stood, tail wagging as he sensed a mission in the making. Astra looked between them, hope and fear warring in her expression. If something happened to you because of me, nothing will happen, Sarah said firmly. We'll wait for dawn, then make our move. The storm's supposed to ease up slightly tomorrow morning, a small window before the next system moves in. Just enough time to get up there and back. Astra nodded slowly. If I can understand what happened during the crash, how this planet's energy changed me, it might be the key to everything. Not just saving myself, but saving my world. As they began planning their expedition, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay waiting in the wreckage of Astra's ship. The alien princess had already demonstrated abilities that seemed to defy physics as Sarah understood it. What else might she be capable of, once she fully understood her new powers? The thrumming returned, closer this time. Scout growled softly as Astra's glow flickered like a candle in the wind. Tomorrow would bring either answers or disaster. For now, all they could do was wait, while above them, through the howling storm, the ships of the Luminarian Guard continued their relentless search. The truth emerges. Dawn broke over the mountains, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of rose and gold. The storm had eased as predicted, leaving behind a crystalline clarity to the air that made every breath sharp and clean. Sarah checked her equipment one final time. Emergency beacon, first aid kit, climbing gear, and enough supplies for a rapid ascent and descent. Scout stood ready in his search and rescue harness, while Astra had wrapped herself in Sarah's spare winter gear. The alien princess's glow was barely visible beneath the layers, making her appear almost human from a distance. The wreckage is about 2 miles up, Sarah said, consulting her GPS. We stick to the tree line as much as possible. If you see or hear anything unusual. Distant whine cut through the morning air, like a jet engine but higher pitched. Astra tensed. Patrol craft. They're running a dawn sweep. They waited in silence until the sound faded, then began their ascent. Scout took point, finding the safest path through the deep snow. The going was slow and treacherous, with hidden crevices and loose rock beneath the fresh powder. Halfway up, Astra stopped suddenly. Wait. She held out her crystalline hand, now glowing brightly despite the daylight. There's something different here, the energy patterns in the air. Sarah watched in amazement as visible waves of light seemed to flow from the surrounding environment into Astra's form. The alien princess's eyes widened. It's like the crash site created a focal point, concentrating Earth's natural energy fields. I've never felt anything like it. They pressed on, climbing higher as the tree line thinned. The wreckage came into view, twisted metal and crystal fragments scattered across a blast radius nearly 50 yards wide. At the center lay the main hull of Astra's exile ship, its once sleek form now crumpled and broken. Scout's hackles rose as they approached. The air itself seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy that made Sarah's skin tingle. Astra moved with purpose toward the wreck, her movements becoming more fluid and graceful as she absorbed the ambient energy. The computer core should still be intact, she said, reaching into the twisted hull. It's designed to survive any crash. If I can just. Her words cut off as her hand made contact with a partially exposed crystal panel. Light exploded from the point of contact, enveloping Astra in a cocoon of pure energy. Sarah started forward, but Scout held her back with a warning bark. Inside the light show, Astra's form seemed to shift and change, becoming more luminous, more ethereal. When the display finally faded, she stood transformed. Her crystalline skin now rippled with colors that seemed to exist beyond the visible spectrum, and her eyes held the light of distant stars. I remember, she whispered, her voice resonating with new power. I remember everything. The ship's computer core projected a holographic display, showing scenes from Luminara. Sarah watched as the images revealed Administrator Vex secretly harvesting energy from the heart of Luminara, weakening it deliberately while blaming the dying sun for their worlds growing cold. He wasn't trying to save our world, Astra said, her voice tight with anger and grief. He was weaponizing our dependence on the heart. Once the people were desperate enough, he would offer a solution at the cost of total control. But you discovered his plan, Sarah realized. Yes, but I didn't understand the full scope until now. Astra touched another crystal, bringing up new data. The exile ship's trajectory wasn't random. Vex knew about Earth, about its unique energy patterns. He wanted me to crash here. Why? Because he needed to know if it was possible. If a Luminarian could survive exposure to Earth's raw energy, I was his test subject. Astra's glow pulsed with revelation. But he didn't account for how that energy would change me. The crash didn't just let me survive Earth's power. It taught me to harness it in ways our people never imagined possible. A familiar thrumming filled the air, much closer than before. Scout barked in warning as 3 sleek crystalline ships descended through the clouds, their forms radiating the same cold light as Luminara itself. Guard ships, Astra said grimly. Vex must have monitored the computer core's activation. Sarah reached for her emergency beacon, but Astra caught her hand. No more running. The alien princess stood tall, her transformed body glowing with newfound power. Vex wanted to know if Earth's energy could change a Luminarian. Now he's going to find out exactly how much. The guard ships touched down in a triangle formation around the crash site, their crystalline hulls pulsing with barely contained energy. From the lead vessel emerged a figure that could only be Administrator Vex himself, his faceted form radiating cold authority. Princess Astra, he called out, his voice carrying that same musical quality as hers, but stripped of all warmth. I see you've survived your exile. How fortunate. Your participation in this experiment has been most illuminating. This ends now, Vex, Astra replied, stepping forward. Sarah and Scout flanked her, presenting a united front despite being hopelessly outgunned. I know what you did to the heart, what you planned for our people. Vex spread his crystalline hands in a gesture of mock benevolence. I am saving our people, dear princess. This primitive world has shown us the way. Once we understand how to process raw energy as you now do, we can transform our entire society. No more dependence on the heart, no more careful rationing of power. We will become gods. You're going to kill everyone. Astra shot back. The average Luminarian can't handle this kind of power. The transformation would shatter them. The strong will survive, Vex said dismissively. Evolution demands sacrifice. Now come quietly, and I may spare your pet primitives. Sarah felt Astra tense beside her. The air around them began to shimmer with barely contained energy as 2 civilizations, one ancient and crystalline, one young and fierce, prepared to clash on a snow-covered mountain peak far from both their homes. 2 worlds, 1 heart. The mountain air crackled with energy as Astra faced down Administrator Vex and his guard ships. Snow began to lift from the ground around her feet, swirling in impossible patterns as she channeled Earth's raw power. Sarah had never felt so small or so determined as she stood beside the transformed alien princess, Scout's steady presence at her side. Your final chance, princess, Vex announced, his crystalline form pulsing with cold light. Surrender yourself for study, and these primitives need not suffer. Astra's response came not in words but in action. She thrust her hands forward, releasing a wave of pure energy that turned the snow between them to steam. Vex barely managed to raise a defensive barrier, his perfect composure cracking slightly. Guards, he commanded, contain her. Luminarian soldiers poured from the ships, their crystalline armor glinting in the morning sun. They raised weapons that looked like they were carved from living crystal, unleashing beams of concentrated light. But Astra was ready. She pulled the energy from their attacks, absorbing and redirecting it in a dazzling display of power. Scout, find cover, Sarah called, diving behind a twisted piece of wreckage as the mountain peak became a battlefield. Her search and rescue training hadn't prepared her for anything like this, but she refused to abandon Astra. The alien princess was magnificent, moving like a dancer through the chaos. Where before she had struggled to contain Earth's wild energy, now she wielded it with precision. Each gesture sent waves of power rippling through the air, disrupting the guards' formations and shorting out their weapons. But Vex proved a more dangerous opponent. He approached methodically, analyzing Astra's new abilities with cold calculation. "Fascinating," he said, deflecting one of her attacks. "The integration of Earth's energy patterns has progressed far beyond my projections. When we replicate this process..." "You still don't understand," Astra shouted, frustration evident in her voice. "This power can't be replicated or controlled. Earth's energy is alive in a way our artificial systems never were. It has to be respected, worked with, not dominated." Sarah watched the exchange, her mind racing. Something about the way Vex moved, always maintaining the same distance from Astra. "Scout," she whispered to her companion. "Circle pattern." The German shepherd understood immediately, slipping away through the chaos while Sarah emerged from cover, drawing attention by waving her emergency flare. Crystal Face, your barrier has a blind spot." Vex turned slightly, dismissing her with a glance. "Silence, primitive. This is beyond your comprehension." His words cut off as Scout burst from the snow behind him, catching the administrator off guard. The momentary disruption of his concentration was all Astra needed. She thrust both hands forward, channeling not just Earth's energy, but the very essence of what she had learned during her exile. The power of connection, of trust, of friendship freely given. The blast caught Vex squarely, shattering his defensive barrier and sending him sprawling. The remaining guards froze, weapons half-raised, as their leader struggled to rise. "Impossible," Vex gasped, his perfect crystalline form showing cracks. "How can you command such power?" "Because I stopped trying to command it," Astra replied, her transformed body glowing like a newborn star. "Earth taught me that true strength comes not from control, but from harmony. The humans understand this in ways we forgot long ago." She turned to address the guards. "Look at what he's done to our world. The heart of Luminara doesn't need to be weaponized. It needs to be renewed. Earth's energy patterns, properly understood, could revitalize our dying sun. We could save our people without sacrificing our souls." The guards looked at each other, centuries of conditioning warring with the evidence before them. Slowly, one by one, they lowered their weapons. "No," Vex snarled, pulling himself up. "I will not let primitives and traitors destroy everything I've worked for." He reached into his crystalline form and withdrew a shard of pure darkness, a piece of the corrupted heart itself. "Astra, look out," Sarah called, but she was already moving. Scout barked in warning as Vex channeled the heart's twisted energy, releasing a beam of anti-light that threatened to unmake anything it touched. Time seemed to slow. Sarah saw Astra gather her power, saw the love for both her old world and her new friends shining in her transformed eyes. Instead of fighting Vex's attack, she opened herself to it, creating a circuit of energy that connected Earth's vibrant power with the corrupted heart shard. The resulting cascade of light was visible from orbit, where corruption met creation, where artificial control faced natural harmony. A new balance was struck. The heart shard in Vex's hands began to pulse with clean, pure light, resonating with the energy Astra channeled. Vex fell to his knees, the fight draining from him as he stared at the restored crystal. "The heart," he whispered, "it's singing." "The song it was always meant to sing," Astra said softly. "The same song Earth shares with its children, if we only learn to listen." The guards approached cautiously, their weapons forgotten. One of them spoke. "Princess, the readings we're getting. This energy pattern could stabilize not just the heart, but our entire star system." "Then let's take this knowledge home," Astra replied, "not as conquerors, but as students. Earth has taught me more than I ever dreamed possible." She turned to Sarah and Scout, her expression soft despite her radiant form. Thanks to two remarkable teachers, Sarah felt tears freeze on her cheeks as she hugged her alien friend. Scout pressed against both of them, tail wagging. Above, the rising sun broke fully over the mountain peaks, bathing them all in the light of a new day. 3 days later, Sarah and Scout stood in the same spot, watching a very different ship prepare for launch. Astra, still radiant with Earth's energy, but now tempered by wisdom, made her final preparations. "The Council will need proof of Vex's crimes," she said, securing the restored heart shard, "and guidance in using Earth's energy patterns to save our world. I have to go." "I know," Sarah replied, fighting back tears. "Just promise you'll come back someday." Scout will miss his favorite alien princess. Astra knelt to hug the dog, her light dimming to a soft glow. "I promise. After all, Earth is part of me now. And so are you both." As the ship rose into the crystal-clear mountain sky, Sarah felt Scout lean against her leg. She scratched his ears, smiling despite her sadness. "Good boy," she whispered. "We did good." Scout barked in agreement, his breath frosting in the cold air. Above them, Astra's ship became a bright star among many, carrying the promise of harmony between worlds back to a civilization that had forgotten how to listen to the music of the universe. Sarah turned to head home, knowing that whenever the northern lights danced above the mountains, she would think of her friend who learned that the greatest power comes not from control, but from connection. And somewhere up there, a crystal world was about to learn the same lesson, thanks to a princess, a human, and one very special dog.